you like streaming? Well then I got to show you something new for your stream to deck your competitors and plus your stream. I've got the Elgato Stream Deck Plus. It's the latest Elgato Stream Deck. I was trying to work it into the sentence. Didn't work. Let's talk about this new Stream Deck. Before we get into talking about the Stream Deck itself, let's talk about what you actually get in the box. You do, of course, get the Stream Deck Plus itself. If you didn't get this, that would be really silly. You also get a 1 meter long USB-C to USB-A braided cable, as well as some doodly doos and don'tly don'ts. So what makes this different from other Stream Decks? Two things. Number one, there is a screen here, which is also a touchscreen. Number two, there are these 4 dials down here that can rotate in full 360 degrees. These new additions change the formula from what previously Elgato Stream Decks consisted of, which was primarily of these buttons here, these touch panels that you can press to use. Now you have the touchscreen here as well as the dials, and it gives you a lot of different options to use, especially if you already have some of Elgato's other stuff already. Now that that's all said and done, let's talk about what this new iteration of Stream Deck offers you that the previous ones didn't. Primarily with the dials, you now have much finer grain control over certain things, and this really translates well across to certain other Elgato features and software, such as with the wavelength. You can now control the wavelength audio on a very fine grain scale, and you can adjust it on the fly. If you have the Elgato face cam, you can adjust things like the brightness or the color temperature on the fly as well, and it gives you a really nice, really fine-grained control over it. With the addition of the dials, you now have a new functionality called dial stacks. What you can do is you can add multiple different actions to one dial, and then you can toggle between them by pressing down on the dial. This is a little bit like the multi-action switch of the Stream Deck, but with more options possible. With the touchscreen, if you are using audio sources on the dials, you can now touch the touchscreen to mute them and unmute them as you want. The touchscreen also offers you the functionality to be able to swipe between pages. Previously, with the other Stream Decks, you would have to set up one button as a dedicated button to go and switch between all of the different pages if you had more than however many buttons that there were. This time with this one, whenever you want to go to another page, you can just swipe through on the screen instead of having a dedicated button, therefore freeing you up to have much more functionality and much more customization, as opposed to just having to have a default go-to. As of this video release, there are only a couple of plugins that will be able to interact with the dials and touchscreen. However, I am confident that there will be more down the road. One of the ones that Elgato released recently was one that would allow you to set certain app volumes to each of the dials instead of having the wavelength dedicated sound sources. This means you can have much finer grain control over, let's say, a very specific app or maybe a specific game or whatever. So what do I like about this Stream Deck? I like that they've tried something new. They didn't go with the same formula as before. You now have the touchscreen and you have the dials. This gives you a lot of different options. At the moment, the options are limited, but I think down the road, when they add in more plugins and more functionality, this will be quite a powerful tool. I also like that because of the built-in stand and the extra space that they had to add to make room for the dials and the screen, you now have more space, and the Stream Deck itself is a little bit higher. This is something I haven't come across before. Normally the Stream Decks are quite low, but this one is much higher than the standard one, and it makes it easier to use, easier to press the buttons. You don't have to be searching down quite low. The fact that the screen is a touchscreen, I think, is the cherry on top, because now you don't have to save one of the buttons for your page button. You can just use the screen to swipe back and forth. It saves some space, and it allows you to use all of the buttons for functions that you would need them for, instead of having to reserve one or two for the page forward and page back buttons. Also, the screen is very handy. Again, at the moment, I think the options are limited, but down the road, I think they'll give more functionality for things that can be displayed on the screen, and that will give you more and more information that you can have at a glance when you are using it for your stream. Where do I think this falls short? I think that it doesn't have enough buttons. Obviously, they had to make space for the dials and for the touchscreen, but 8 buttons is a bit limited for me. I know you can swipe through them very easily with the touchscreen. However, I like to have a couple of different things at my finger's touch, and if I have to swipe through to get them, that can make it slightly more complicated. It's not a deal breaker for me, however, it does make it slightly more complicated to use. So what do I think about this? I think if you fall into a category of people who already have some of Elgato's other stuff, this is a game changer. It allows you to interact with the Elgato's Wave XLR and Wave Link. It allows you to interact with Elgato's Facecam and Elgato's streaming lights, and allows you to adjust their settings on the fly with really fine-grained control. This can be really handy. For example, for me, I have the Wave XLR, and I can adjust the audio sources and mute them dynamically as I want through the dials, and have much more options over them and have much more control over them. What Elgato have done here is they have basically taken something like the Go XLR and they've broken it down into its individual components. So now what you can do is you can get the individual pieces such as the Wave XLR or the Stream Deck Plus by themselves. However, if you want the full functionality of something like a Go XLR with the mixer, with the XLR input, with everything all together, being able to adjust the volume on the fly, you have these two, you can put them together. Or if you have the lights or you have the camera, you can now put them all together and you have this big modular ecosystem where you can control everything dynamically and with fine-grained control. This is really good. I actually got really annoyed when I realized this. Like, Elgato, stop making good stuff. Stop making stuff that interacts with other stuff. I hate it. I miss not being able to have 5 different programs and 5 different installers to have to control each of these pieces. With this update, you've now allowed me to control all of my stuff through each other. All jokes aside, genuinely, this is a really big step forward. If you step into the Elgato ecosystem, you can now control everything through everything else. If you have something like a Stream Deck and a Stream Pedal, you have the lights, you have the camera, they can all be controlled with each other, and you can do certain things like you can adjust the profiles for one Stream Deck crossing over to another Stream Deck or the Stream Pedal. You can adjust the brightness of the lights. You can really do everything. It's getting harder and harder to not step into the Elgato ecosystem because it works so well. Everything connects to everything else seamlessly. If you liked what you saw, why don't you like and subscribe to see more of this in the future? And why don't you let me know in the comments below, what do you think about this? Is this something that you would be interested in, or do you think that this is maybe a bit more limited in its use?